tries to push to go after the media? How would you respond to that?
I have not, clearly he's made some statements, but I haven't talked to Mr. Patel about those statements. But going after the media just because they're the media is wrong, of course.
All right, thank you.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, I admire your spunk.
Coming from you, Senator, that is a huge compliment.
You know, I learned the hard way up here. You may know it already, but up here, if you turn the other cheek, you just get it in the neck. You're friends with President Trump, are you?
Yes, Senator, and I spoke to him this morning.
You're not enemies.
No, Senator, I don't think I'd be sitting here if I was an enemy. He'd be crazy to have me sitting here if I was an enemy.
So you're friends.
Yes, Senator.
I find otherworldly this suggestion by some of my colleagues that somehow disqualifies you. Have you ever seen a president of the United States appoint his enemies to his cabinet?
Exactly, Senator. I think many presidents, including President Obama, were friends with his attorney general throughout the years.
Okay. I want to also ask you about one of the suggestions of my colleagues. I wrote it down. He said he was concerned that, quote, you would start with a name to prosecute and then look for a crime, unquote. It made me immediately think of District Attorney Bragg in New York, who actually in 2019 ran a campaign in large part suggesting that if you elect me, I'll prosecute Donald Trump.
I believe there were others as well, Senator.
Right. How long were you a prosecutor?
18 years.
Okay. Is there anything in your background to suggest that my colleague's suggestion that you would start with a name and then look for a crime, is there anything in your background that would give him basis to say that?
No, Senator.
Okay. Have you ever done that?
No, Senator. And I think I have a lot of former colleagues sitting behind me who would back me up on that as well.
Do you plan to do that as Attorney General?
Of course not, Senator. I hope no Attorney General going forward would ever do that.
Well, I thank you for your time today. One need not be clairvoyant to see that you're going to be confirmed. And you talked a lot about bringing us together today. I'll make this suggestion. Senator Durbin talked about it. You can bring us together if you will just answer Grassley's letters. That will be a really good start because you'll never hear the end of it, nor should you. The man he's like a dog on a bone.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Bondi. Three things. One, I do have some concern that whoever is the Attorney General, you or anyone, is going to be presumably, will be under a significant amount of pressure at some point from the President. Attorney General Barr was, Attorney General Sessions was. And you've made it very clear your client is the Constitution. I think that's very reassuring to us. But the President does have now a Supreme Court provided immunity. And I just want to express to you my concern, and it really does align with what Senator Schiff said. You have what I regard as a very bad decision by the Supreme Court. The president should not be above the law, never has been. And my concern, on the basis of statements that President-elect Trump has made, is that he does identify people as political enemies, including Senator Schiff. And there may come a day where there is pressure on you. And I'm just going to express my hope that that independence that you've had throughout your career when it comes to the Constitution or pressure from a higher official, that you're going to choose the Constitution. So you don't even have to answer that, but it's a concern I share, I think, not just with colleagues here, but with many Americans. My colleagues have made the case about weaponization in this administration. We can have a debate about that, but there's been a universal statement here that we want the rule of law to be the basis of going forward. So thank you for allowing me to say that. Second, I'm really interested in your focus on how do we cut down on recidivism. I was a public defender. That's how I got started. You started prosecutor. In Vermont, prosecutors and defenders were good friends. We each had a job to do. But my experience with my clients, and I'm accepting folks who just, they're really dangerous. You've got to lock them up. You've got to throw away the key. But the vast majority of people had a substance abuse problem, oftentimes have very limited education, oftentimes face these incredible dilemmas that Senator Coons was talking about, where they get fines and they get their license suspended, so the job they had now they lose. So can you just elaborate a bit on what you want to do to inject some energy into dealing with cutting down on recidivism?
Well, first, we can address it at the Bureau of Prison level, of course, what we talked about. Those are for the people who will be locked up in prison serving sentences, to make sure they get the resources that they need upon release. 98% of the people in the Bureau of Prisons will be released. I believe it's a mess right now, a mess. And when you look at an organizational chart of the office, assuming I may get confirmed, I was looking at all the slots, and my eyes went down to the bottom to Bureau of Prisons because of my career experience as a prosecutor and caring about what happens there for the very reasons you said. We need more drug courts, and you were talking about drug addicts as well. Mm-hmm. It's more than that, and we both know that. It's also people who are dual diagnosed, meaning right. You have a drug addiction but also mental health issues, and that's
well,
Senator, I can't wrap my head around yet.
Right. I'd like to work with you on that. And then the third thing is that I mentioned this earlier, the consumer issues, the False Claims Act efforts that you can bring, the challenge to ripoffs in the civil sphere, where companies are doing things that are just crushing our consumers and charging ripoff and overcharging. That is very, very important, and I hope that there'll be as much emphasis on protecting consumers as there will be on protecting public safety, which obviously is a high priority for you and for the department.
Yes, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you're doing incredible today. I'm not surprised. Mom, how are you doing? Good?
I told her not to react no matter what.
That's probably harder for her than it is for you. Well, listen, we've talked about this over the years. So for me, I didn't know any lawyers growing up. I'm trying to think when I actually met a lawyer in my life. I grew up in a really blue-collar neighborhood, but I was attracted to the law because I felt like it gave guardrails for people to pursue their dreams, right? That you would be on equal footing. And I think that your fights for the little guy, I referenced this in the opening statements, are admirable. And, you got some questions earlier about, are you willing to stand up against corporate interests, or are you willing to fight back? I mean, I think you've demonstrated that, right?
I think we did it together when we were attorneys general as well.
Yeah, your client is the people, and it's your job to fight for them, because in these jobs, especially even a local prosecutor, I think is even more appropriate scenario. There's only one local prosecutor. There's only one prosecutor in that county. So it's interesting when we have these discussions about some of these prosecutors across the country, and Senator Hawley and I know there's been a couple in Missouri, and they're all around. When they decide not to charge violent criminals, there's nobody else who can do that. There's nobody else that can do that. One of the things that when I was Attorney General we were able to do when President Trump was in office, sadly the Biden administration dropped this effort, was we had assistant AGs deputized as assistant U.S. attorneys to help fight violent crime, to add capacity. And when, there was a surge to take on some of the most violent criminals on the streets, we were there to help. Those are the kind of partnerships I'm guessing that you'll look towards, right? To get back to the core mission of taking on violent crime and fighting for the little guy. So I wanted to give you a little bit of an opportunity to talk about that. And also, sort of what's your vision? You're answering a lot of questions. What's your vision for the department? I mean, how do you see your role? How do you want to go do that? I think you're incredibly qualified to do it, but just in your own words, what are the things that you're going to focus on?
Senator, it's truly overwhelming when you look at the volume of that department. The Department of Justice, it is the largest law firm in the world and manages the largest law enforcement agencies. And that's why, first and foremost, what I did when I was Attorney General, you surround yourself with great people. And that includes Gail Slater, that includes my Chief of Staff, if I am confirmed, my deputy, and so on and so on, and work from there. But look at each and every department, and I don't know if one department is more important than the other, but I will work very hard every day. And as Senator Welsh had said, it's not only fighting crime. I think that's just first and foremost on Americans' minds right now. But that's why there is an entire huge civil division that falls under the Department of Justice to protect consumers, to do the antitrust cases, to do all the Medicare cases, to do all of the other cases. So it's multifaceted. But first and foremost, of course, to keep America safe and restore integrity to that department. I don't think I can stress enough that 72% of Americans have lost faith in the Department of Justice.
Yeah, and I think that the belief that the American people need to have, again, is that people are going to be treated the same. As you said earlier, there's only one tier. There's not two tiers of justice. And I think that's, when you really dig down to some of the comments you've heard and questions, at least on this side, that's the big concern. I don't want it tilted in anybody's direction. You just want it to be fair. And you want certainly the top law enforcement official in the country to view it that way. I think you do. And I think your history, your qualifications, your demeanor, your character warrant a bipartisan vote. I hope you get it. I really do. You deserve it.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you, Ms. Bondi, for answering our question. I want to come back to TikTok. And we ran out of time when I was asking you before about the importance of the law that was passed overwhelmingly bipartisan majority here in the United States Congress. As you know, last year, a Chinese hacking group, it was called Salt Typhoon, broke into several American phone companies, reportedly used that access to spy on the White House, the FBI, other sensitive government targets. The threat of Chinese communist espionage goes beyond just watching. It also involved potentially shutting down our grids, other critical infrastructure targets. I assume you agree with me that Chinese cyber warfare, espionage, malign influence is an existential threat to America.
It is an existential threat, Senator, and also I have not seen it yet, but from what I've heard about former FBI Director Wray's comments on 60 Minutes regarding China, sleeper cells within our own country, infiltrating our water systems, our natural gas lines, telecommunications, a very, very real threat to our country.
I'm glad that we agree, and as you know, and as the Department of Justice has noted, it's not classified, so we can talk about it openly. The ByteDance is beholden to the demands of the Chinese government. It is controlled by the Chinese government, and it in turn controls TikTok. Do you agree that ByteDance's control, ownership, exploitation of TikTok is a threat to American national security.
Senator, this is pending litigation within the Department of Justice.
Okay,
and-
let me put it
and
a
I
different way.
can't talk
It's not
about that at
pending
all.
litigation within the Department of Justice. It's in the courts.
In the courts.
And the Department of Justice is currently defending
Yes.
the constitutionality of American law. Will you
Pending.
continue to defend the law passed by the Congress defending America's national security?
Senator, I cannot, it would be irresponsible for me to talk about anything, and it is pending litigation.
you
We
know,
can talk
I was
semantics all
Attorney
day
General,
long.
and very
I'm not
often-
trying to hedge on anything, Senator.
Oh,
I
I'm
just
having
can't
a
comment on
problem
any.
with the idea that you won't tell me that the Department of Justice will continue to defend against constitutional attacks the law of the United States. When I was Attorney General of the state of Connecticut, I would say I have an obligation to defend the law of Connecticut against any attacks. You have an obligation, or you did as Attorney General of Florida, to go to court when those laws were attacked. You have an obligation as United States Attorney General to do what this Attorney General is doing, whether you agree with it or not, and frankly, whatever the president thinks about that law, you have an obligation to defend it. This is an easy question for you. Will you defend laws of the United States of America against constitutional attacks? I'm asking you in general.
In general, yes.
And with respect to the law that would require divestiture of TikTok, which is a law passed by this body and supported by, I think, a majority of members on both sides of the aisle, why can't you tell us that you will defend it?
Senator, I'm not hedging. This is all pending litigation, and I can't talk about pending litigation if confirmed as Attorney General.
I have to tell you, with all due respect, that answer is unacceptable to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I go to Senator Brett, I'd like to enter a letter into the record from former Department of Justice employees who support Ms. Bondi's nomination. This bipartisan group of attorneys includes several former AGs, assistant attorneys general, U.S. attorneys, right to share both strong and enthusiastic support, unquote, for Ms. Bondi and attest to their, quote, integrity, her integrity and devotion to the rule of law, end of quote, without objection. I would enter these into the record. Hearing none, so ordered. Senator Brett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have insinuated that your friendship with Donald Trump is a problem. My colleagues on my side of the aisle have leaned into this, kind of exposing the hypocrisy, given what we have seen before from previous administrations. And I would just like to read something to you from 1961. Washington, January 13th. The Senate Judiciary Committee approved without objection today President-elect John F. Kennedy's selection of his brother, Robert, as Attorney General. The vote came after a 2-hour hearing. Would you like a 2-hour hearing, by the way?
Can we redo this?
Yeah, that's right. The vote came after a 2-hour hearing devoted in large part to the praise of Mr. Kennedy. Forecasts that there would be several critical questionings, especially from Republicans, proved incorrect. All 14 committee members present voted to approve the nomination when it was formally made. The New York Times. As it said, blood is thicker than water, meaning family bonds are stronger than any other relationship. I just think that that needs to be before the American people once again, and I appreciate you continuing to reiterate that you will serve the people of this great country and that you will follow the law.
Thank you, Senator.
I'd like to move to something that has become another theme of this hearing, and that is Senator Grassley's letters. So I myself sent a letter to our current Attorney General and unfortunately received the very same treatment. So in front of this committee, Merrick Garland, Attorney General Garland, had made a testimony that we found evidence to possibly contradict what he had said. On March 23rd, he came in front of the Appropriations Committee, where I was a member, and I presented him with evidence that the DOJ had actively discouraged the enforcement of 18 United States Code Section 1507 at the homes of Supreme Court justices in the wake of the leak of the Dobbs decision. Evidence that appeared that he had clearly either misled or misinformed this committee. Evidence that showed that the department was putting politics above duty. Section 1507, as you well know, makes it illegal to picket or parade near a judge's residence and with the intent of influencing them in the discharge of their duty. It was openly and flagrantly violated on numerous occasions in the summer of 2022, yet never enforced by U.S. Marshals stationed at the home of the justices, in large part because of the evidence that we showed that they had been actively discouraged from making arrests. When we asked Attorney General Garland why no one had been prosecuted, he said because no one had been arrested. Really going back to the fact that the U.S. Marshals in these slides were actively discouraged from making them. On May 3rd, 2023, I led a group of senators, many on this committee, sending a letter to the Attorney General asking him for a response to 19 questions by the end of May. And to this day, I have yet to receive any actual response to any of my questions. To Senator Grassley's second point, if you do get a response, which mine came almost a year late, it was just words on paper. And so what I'd like to know from you is two things. One, if confirmed, will you do everything in your power to have yourself or one of your top officials respond in a timely manner to those of us on this committee? And second, since I am almost out of time, will you commit to working to help me get answers about why this happened in the Department of Justice so that we